You're watching live now. I'm Austin Westfall. Live look at the White House, 7:15 in the nation's capital. Today, markets reacting sharply to a fresh flare-up in transatlantic tensions amid President Trump's efforts to own Greenland. Today was the first day of trading since the president aggressively renewed threats against European allies. The Wall Street Journal saying that stocks slumped after the president stepped up his campaign to take over Greenland and threatened new restrictions on trade with Europe, should he not get his way. The Dow plunging nearly 900 points today. Standing by is Anna Rathbun. She's the founder and CEO of Grenadilla Advisory. So today's sell-off was tied less to earnings and more to headlines after the U.S. signaled new tariff pressure on several European countries. What specifically do markets fear most in a moment like this?
Well, this was more of a liberation part two or a deja vu from last year. It's an introduction of additional uncertainty. If you think about since April 2nd of last year, tariffs were introduced, negotiated downward, and it was pretty quiet for a while as the nations actually work out the details. And then suddenly, the tariffs are back, right? So business leaders actually need some certainty in the rules of the game in order to plan out for the next 6 months or a year so that the companies can grow. When rules of the game change on a dime like this, it's difficult to plan, it's difficult to hire, it's difficult to invest, it's difficult to run companies. And I think that's one of the things that the markets were expressing today is the sudden onset of some of the uncertainty that's coming from the tariff policy or onset of tariffs in general.
Was this a plunge impacting multiple industries, or did we see certain industries get affected more than others?
Yeah, it was a classic sell-off. So, which means that more growth-oriented stocks like tech stocks sold off more, whereas, consumer staples, which is normally considered to be defensive sector, actually did better, lost less. And those would be your grocery stores, basically. So, under the hood, it actually showed the classic signs of a risk-off where investors really, if you didn't really understand the future earnings like growth stocks, maybe it was sell now and think later.
You know, Europe has said, and I believe it
Mhm.
was Emmanuel Macron earlier today, he was kind of giving us some insight into some of the tools that Europe has to respond with economic pressure. Macron recently said that the EU could retaliate by deploying one of its most powerful economic tools. He called it a trade bazooka. What would be the first place, Anna, you'd expect to see real economic damage if this turns into a larger sustained trade conflict?
My expectation is that it's actually not going to turn into a sustained trade conflict. And here's why. First of all, we're still waiting from the Supreme Court to understand whether or not this type of tariffs from the executive branch is even constitutional. And that can come at any time. It was actually supposed to come, a few days ago, last Friday, and it didn't come. So there's a lot to be here that would need to be flushed out to begin with. And secondly, if we learned anything from last year, the Liberation Day, sell-off, what we had was big tariffs that were announced, and then subsequently people getting together, sitting in front of each other in conference rooms, I presume, to work out the details and work out a deal. Now, it's inefficient to do it the second time, especially since they've been working all through last year. But I imagine that is where we're going to be headed. I don't think we're going to see any kind of bazooka from Europe. And I don't think we're going to be, I hope not, alienating our friends in Europe. There are more than one way, which is taking over Greenland, to actually have military support in that island with NATO, with Europe. So I imagine that they'll be looking for a resolution.
As you know, President Trump is heading to the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, and he's going to be speaking there tomorrow. What is the most important signal, in your opinion, that the White House needs to send at the forum in order to prevent Greenland from turning into a wider economic crisis?
I would love to see signs of real leadership. And by that, what I mean is yes, Europe does you need the United States, but we need Europe too. So, is some semblance of cooperation, maybe led by US military, because the US military might is unmatched all around the world, right? But it really will take a lot of cooperation on Greenland to secure a military prowess. Because if you do look at the map, Greenland is an important point in the Arctic region. But I would love to see some leadership, some language that would help rally the troops rather than to divide. I think that's really important at this juncture, especially when we're dealing with not just Greenland, not just Russia and Ukraine, but also the Middle East. There are a lot of things around the world that makes investors nervous. And so that would actually help to calm the markets.
Are there any specific countries you're looking for reaction from? I mentioned it was France's Macron that mentioned that economic bazooka idea, but are there other countries
Yeah.
that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so apparently Denmark is not coming. So I can't keep an eye on them right now. But Germany, certainly. And the reason why I say this is because no matter how much France wants to send a bazooka, I do think that Germany will keep some of the hot, fiery rhetoric at bay. Germany is an exporting country, not unlike China. They need people to buy things, so tariffs will actually impact them a lot. And anything that escalates is going to impact their economy. So I would be looking for language from Germany and certainly calming rhetoric from Germany as well. And I think they'll be the calming factor.
Short term spooks like this and market drops like this, it does lead to short term, I'll use the word spook again, people that are looking at their 401ks or that are invested in these major indexes. They look at this and they might feel some short term pain. Any advice for the long term?
Yes, don't sell into a sell-off. Remember, we just had the an example last year. There was a huge sell-off. It was oversold after Liberation Day. And if you had actually gotten out of the market, you would have missed a very big rally from the low point until the end of the year. The S&P 500 managed to hit record highs after Liberation Day. So if you are a long-term investor, hold tight.
Okay, we appreciate the time. Anna Rathbun is the founder and CEO of Granadilla Advisory. Take care.
Thank you.